right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Untangled. Today's guest is Guneet Singh, a passionate and visionary leader with deep global experience in driving top line impact while cultivating people and purpose. Guided by the core belief that every customer, employee, and interaction matters, Guneet has built a career around connecting strategy with human experience. All my favorite words. Welcome to the show, Guneet. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Adrian. It's an honor and pleasure to be here and chat with you and share my experience so far. So good to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so Guneet, so my audience is mainly UXers. We have a wide variety of people who are coming into the space, as well as what I say, old heads like myself who have been doing this a long time. So, would you mind introducing yourself and telling them a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I lead customer experience and care at Appfolio. Appfolio is a public SaaS company serving real estate industry. My role spans everything from frontline support to AI transformation, managing vendors, driving customer education and training. At the same time, also thinking about how do we design experiences. So I have wear the hat of customer experience from that capacity, looking at each and every interaction over the customer life cycle. So that's a very nutshell in terms of the company I'm working in currently and the role. Over the last few years, my work has been about mostly reimagining how we deliver value, not just through the experience or the services, but scale and build some genuine human connection. As we think about what is customers actually are looking to solve when they are coming to your product, coming to your services. Build that human genuine connection. And I operate from a deep belief that great people actually build great products and great companies. Customer obsession is far more than just a metric or a mantra for me. It's more like a mindset, which is embedded in terms of, how do we build system? How do we design system? And how we listen. And
Okay.
also in terms of, how we show up in these tough moments. Outside of work, I'm an avid hiker, a lifelong learner. I've climbed a few peaks in Southern California as well as Mount Whitney, and
Okay.
I do have a small newsletter that I write once in a while when I'm not deep into back-to-back meetings and work from that perspective. So that's a little bit about myself.
Okay, awesome. Guni, you said a couple of things that I'm going to come back to, but let's start with like your journey. How did you get into customer experience? And then my favorite question, what was it called when you got started?
I love that question. I will say, there are a lot of inspiring leaders in the customer experience space. If you are in this particular space, you'll know them very easily if I start throwing names. But one of the famous saying from leader I really inspire is he keeps reminding people that nobody goes to school to be a CX specialist. So I'm just gonna tap into that one as like I didn't go to school to be in a customer experience professional. I was a science majors and things like that. But what was definitely an interesting turn in my life was building that deep understanding about what are we trying to solve. And that actually helped me also bring that thinking towards the customer. That when we think about customer, when we think about customer experience, it's all about like what are we trying to solve. So that triggered me. Hey, I need to go into this kind of profession or this domain where I want to help customers. I want to help companies bridge that gap. Because instead of just running around and trying to stand up services, stand up product, let's try to understand what are we trying to solve for and why. So that helped me get into this space itself in terms of understanding what are the different things, what are the principles. There is no right and wrong way. You practice, you learn, and then you experiment, and then you say, does it actually help the customers or not? Does it actually help the company or not? And that's has been very pivotal in me taking up this journey at this profession itself.
So I was digging into, the LinkedIn page, I'm nosy, so I was digging. And I noticed that you did quite a bit of work in Six Sigma. So where did Six Sigma go? Right? Do people still talk about that? Did that evolve into become something else? Like, where did Six Sigma go?
Oh, I love this question. I really like it, the spirit of it. So that's, I think, the beauty and also the danger of getting boxed in or tied into a particular methodology or a particular approach. Where did Six Sigma go? I think Six Sigma is still here, Companies who really understand Six Sigma, they're still using it. Are they marketing it? Are they bragging about it? No, but they're just reaping the benefits out of it.
Hmm.
And Six Sigma is all about the mindset. But companies who did not take Six Sigma as a mindset, you know, leverage it for a year and then kind of change it like a season, and then
Hmm.
moved on to the next one. But companies who really understood it, they're actually embraced those principles into their processes, into their thinking. Because at the core of the Six Sigma, if you are a Six Sigma professional, everything starts with customer at the center of it. That's kind
Hmm.
of is the key principle or the key approach with the Six Sigma. Again, how do we make sure there is no defect, there is no deficiency in the service or the product that we're building or we're servicing? How do we make sure that there is zero or close to zero impact on the customer as a result of failure?
I love that. I think that I tell my UXers, right, like, don't fall in love with the title. That title is going to change, right? Fall in love
Yep.
with the concepts and the methodologies and the theories that are in there. That's awesome. Okay. You said something. You said a customer obsessed culture. What does that look like? What does that mean to you?
It's very loaded. A lot of research, a lot of self-proclaimed authorities slash gurus out there who will define success or what is customer obsessed culture. For me, I think it's all about the mindset. That goes beyond those empty jargons or slogans. You build a customer obsessed mindset or culture when people actually ask in every meeting, irrespective of the level, whether you're executive level or the front line, everybody in the company or in your team actually ask this question: how does this impact the customer? Before asking about cost, or before asking about efficiency, or before asking about the revenue, you know how does this impact, how does this decision or the choice that we are making as a company or as an individual impact the customer? You built the customer obsessed culture when you hear these kind of questions, and the metrics are basically around the value that customer is getting out of it, not around numbers, which is important for the company to run, but they're more focused on effort. I'm
Mhm.
not going to use a popular metric NPS because there's a lot of debate on that. We can come some other day. And also, metrics are not just focused on efficiency. They're really focused on what is the real value that customer is getting out of it. They're buying a product or service for a reason. And are our metrics actually aligned to that? That yes, you have a customer obsessed culture when you see these things. And last but not the least is when your frontline feels like they don't need to ask or they didn't need to get a permission to do what's right for the customer. That's what customer obsessed culture means.
I like that. I like that. One of the things that you mentioned was like this genuine human connection, right? So now you have it's everywhere, right? It's taking over your space, it's taking over mine.
Yep.
So
Yep.
what does a genuine human connection look like when everything is going down this path of AI?
Great. No, I think it's a very good question. And honestly, I'm not a deep researcher or scholar, so I'm going to put that disclaimer out there. From my perspective, genuine deep connection means AI is coming in. People talk about replacing jobs and everything else. I see it that you have to evolve your own skill set. As AI is coming in, no longer you actually do the same thing. You become the AI operator. You start augmenting your skill set. And the reason you want to do that is because when customer is interacting with your service or product, yes, you'll have AI to help them or empower your customer to do self-service or get things resolved by themselves or use the product by themselves or actually kind of finish what they're trying to do. But end of the day, if your customer is still human, you will need that human connection. You will need that empathy. You will need that emotional connection with them. That's where you build that genuine human connection, where you understand, hey, you know what? I understand you're a super user. You have the good product knowledge. You've gone through everything in terms of process and steps and use AI and everything else, but you're still not able to resolve something. Let me kind of get straight to that. So
Mhm.
building system to get to that level of interaction is building that genuine human connection. Rather than, hey, how can I help? When your intent is not to help. Your intent is to just say that and move on to the next call, move on to the next chat, move on to the next, usability metric, or move on to the usage level.
Um, changing gears just a little bit, thinking about where you are in your role, especially in my space, we're always having to
Yeah.
convince somebody, but we're always trying to influence somebody. So, what does
Yeah.
influence look like at your level? So, when you're having these conversations and you're trying to make a case for this amazing
Mhm.
customer experience, how are you pushing the needle?
Yeah, no, it's good. So influence is it will vary a lot, especially with levels within even same levels. From my perspective, or my belief is influence is earned when you actually drive credibility and clarity. Influence is not about authority. We all know that. So influence is all about, if you're able to drive clarity among your team, with your peers, with your cross-functional partner. If you are a UX designer or UX researcher, you're working with the product and the dev, you're driving that clarity, whether you're driving async, user story, or, you're having a stand up, driving that clarity, and then working on that right results and outcomes that you are building the product toward is going to get you credibility that yes, you know your space. Authority will not. Your manager can ask, your product manager to show up, in that meeting with you, but again, that's not going to help. Influence will be earned when you actually kind of, give them something. Hey, you understand, you're a user researcher, you understand the customer, you understand their needs, not because you spent 15 minutes with them on a call with five people on the call asking 20 questions, but you've done your due diligence. You spent like 55 minutes or 2 hours or 3 hours of research, and then you supplemented it with quant and different methods, and then here is a genuine information that you were able to discover about the customer. That was going to get you credibility, and then that will drive influence in your role. Same thing happens, in a CX space. Same thing happens in the front line. Same thing happens at my role when I'm sitting around the leadership. It is not about like, hey, we need to do this because I'm saying so. I need to go back to the basics. What are we trying to solve? What is in it for the customer? What is in it for the business? Driving that clarity. Don't work with assumption. Don't assume people understand that despite they're working with you. So you have to go back to the basics. You have to connect the dots to the business outcome. And I think the most common currency is speak the language, which is understandable. If you're talking to your finance folks, to your CFO, speak the language of finance, ROI, retention. If you're talking to the sales, have them speak the language in terms of, revenue, top line, growth. If you're talking to your, customer teams, speak the language of customer impact, from that perspective. When you talk about Six Sigma, I think you asked about Six Sigma. Six Sigma was a language which was giving everybody in the business a language to understand how do we focus on customers, how do we reduce, the defects, how do we improve the quality. But the quality is very subjective. So it's all about, building those, steps in between so that you can actually drive that clarity and credibility across and build those genuine partnership. Be clear in terms of, why you're solving, what is the purpose. Don't just focus on just share what you're doing. Give them a little bit of a double click in terms of, why, and give them a chance to kind of, ask and say, why are you doing this thing. Don't assume they understand that. Give them that space to let them ask you, how can I help, rather than presuming.
Um, so you've managed research teams and you've been the audience of research teams. I didn't ask you this before, but is it important or valuable to show the time we spent doing the research, right? So a lot of us have gotten away from that, right? We don't talk about how many hours we spent in research and we don't talk about the things that went into it, right? We were told somewhere along the lines, just get to the insights. Is it
Yeah,
important to still show that we're not guessing, right? We spend a lot of time gathering this data. Is that important?
I will answer this way. I follow a couple of good industry leaders over the last 5 years, I'm sure. um, you know we all have seen the new age product leaders, UX leaders, are coming up across, all the channels. One other thing I picked up earlier on from these folks, by shadowing them, is like, listen, you can get to insights, you can use summarization, you're conducting an interview, user interview, you know and you have five people sitting in the room for a 30-minute call. You can get to insights by, doing summarization, but those insights are pretty biased already because everybody has their own intent. So when we talk about time you spend in research, you let the organic conversation happen and brew. Let's understand what customer is going to associate with the question you're asking, and maybe it is triggering something else in their mind. Because if you just go with the whole interview guide, the questions itself, then you're only going to hear what you're asking them. So that's why time is very important. So it's not about showing like, hey, you did 6 hours of research and here are 5 insights. You can still get 5 insights with 30 minutes, but again, do they really have a deep meaning? Are they really kind of connected to the problem that you're trying to solve? Or that insights are just there to justify the hypothesis that you built because
Hmm.
you're in a hurry to ship a product. And there's nothing wrong in that mindset of, yes, we need to ship fast. But again, you need to do proper due diligence of understanding the customer. When you say proper due diligence, it's not about just taking 3 weeks. It's about, have you given customer the space or the user the space to let them actually speak and share their genuine native state of mind versus you forcing 20 questions in front of them from UX hat, product hat, success hat, engineering hat. So hopefully that
Um,
answers your question in terms of outcome versus the time. I think it's a combination, but I think the reason I'm bringing up time is because I'm seeing that user research design, user researcher roles are getting eliminated, and it's like, oh, let's combine user research and user design into one single role, because then focus is only on tactical research, which is like, we have a hypothesis, we're going to do some tactical research and user testing, and then boom. But that's kind of, that dilutes the whole purpose of sitting down and understanding customers.
Absolutely. Let's transition just a little bit, and can you share with the audience kind of like your relationship with UX? Like, where does that cross with CX? How does that fit in?
It's an evergreen question. How does CX and UX exist or coexist? From my lens, I think they are complementary layers of a great customer journey. CX focus on macro journeys, patterns, overall experience, friction across the different channels across different stages, whereas UX focuses or zeroes in on those micro moments or those interactions with the product, with the services, with the touch points. So the example I take is like, UX can also do what CX is doing, and CX can also do what UX is doing. Focus of UX is they go deep into those user interactions, user behaviors for that particular product, for that particular interaction, for that particular touch point. Whereas CX is focused on overall experience design. How do we design that overall journey, overall flow, overall patterns, from that perspective. The
Hmm.
real secret sauce is when both teams are on the same page, understanding they're complementing. They're not kind of, doing each other's job here. They're just kind of, sharing data freely. They're kind of, sharing the feedback loop. You're doing user research for a certain feature or certain product, and then you're leveling it up and saying, hey, from a CX perspective, this fits in this stage of the customer journey and it's struggling. Customer is struggling in this piece, which is part of the overall customer journey. How do we fix it from a design perspective, from an experience design perspective? So then that drives that collaboration, and it's not just handoff. So that's kind of how I see it. They're more complementary.
In your opinion, do you think that the C suite understands the role of UX in that CX kind of paradigm?
Depends, totally depends.
Okay.
If your C-suite is somebody who has been a product leader, who has been in the industry in terms of engineering or product, definitely they have seen that firsthand. They understand CS, they understand CX, they understand UX, so they understand those nuances. But if they come from sales, they come from finance, then no. Then it becomes up to us as CX leaders, UX leaders to constantly educate. The one thing I tell my team and encourage is like, hey, you're not sales team, but your job is to sell, sell, sell. And that something is very important. Whether you're a UX person or whether you're a CX, you have to sell what you're doing, why you're doing, to your leader, to your manager, to your C level. And it's not like one and done. You have to keep reminding because this profession is still young. 20 years, 15 years, it's still pretty early compared to accounting, compared to sales. So things are changing fast. So we need to kind of, product management is still pretty young. So, but we have to keep selling again and again. And one of the reasons why I was interested in even coming and talking to you was because there are not any real tangible and meaningful leaders who are talking about these things.
Thinking about you, so again, a lot of people in my audience are trying to figure out what's next for them, but I think some of the core kind of like key attributes of a person make them successful. So, what would you say has made you successful in your career?
Oh, it's a it's a loaded question, and I can go on. I think staying true to your roots is very important. Understanding what you don't know and understanding what you need to learn and what you need to build the skill set on is very important. I'm not going to use the jargon of imposter syndrome and hey, fake it until you make it kind of stuff. But it's very important for you to understand, hey, what are your strengths and how can you use that to overcome the weaknesses that you have. And if you're the sooner you're able to understand, everybody can understand that literally. But when you're actually working in a team, when you're working in high stress environments, or when you're working in tight timelines, going back to your fundamentals and principles is very important. And I think that makes you successful. I think one thing which has been kind of constant throughout my journey is that very early on I understood this thing, that if I have to grow, I have to be flexible. I have to use the word pivot. Pivot is my favorite word. You gotta understand that if you cannot pivot, then you'll get replaced or you'll get changed and you'll not get success. So you have to understand how to pivot and you have to sense that opportunity to kind of go and move on. Otherwise, you'll get stuck in that loop. So that has been the secret behind kind of understanding that when to pivot. How to pivot you can learn, but understanding your willingness is very important. You cannot just like, hey, I've spent like 6 years doing this. How do you expect me to overnight shift and everything else? You're not going to become an expert in the new domain tomorrow morning, but you will become expert only if you take the first step to do it.
Let's talk about signs of when you should start to think about pivoting. What are some of the signs that you've seen in your career? It's like, I might need to start looking at something different.
Yeah, no, 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 true. I think it's a very fair question. There is no simple answer to that. Depends on what are you trying to chase. What stage of your life you are in. In certain situations, hey, you're chasing a dream, you're chasing a goal, but then your family priorities come in and say, really, is this the right job for me, or is this the right passion that I'm chasing, or what am I trying to do? I'm trying to solve a I was like, yeah, I'm passionate about solving a customer problem. But what is the real why? Because you get a kick out of it and you don't care about anything else, financially or family wise or relationship wise, then great, awesome. You can see those examples in the world. But again, be realistic about like, hey, you're human. What are the needs? And your needs will evolve from different stages of your life. When you pass out of the college, fresh UX graduate or marketing graduate or engineer, you want to work in a nice startup, whereas you want to kind of build skill set, you want to build a relationship, and then you gain that, understand like what have I earned other than the paycheck? Have I actually built relationships? Have I built knowledge outside of what I learned in the college? And then when you grow, come to your 30s and 40s, then it's like, oh great, how do I expand what I already learned on it? Do I need to go deep, or do I need to go into a general management space, or I need into something else, or do I need to do my own startup? So again, it totally depends on what stage of the of your career or life are you on.
Can you spend a little bit of time talking about building relationships, specifically any advice on how to build relationships? Because I see people doing all kinds of
Yeah,
things. It's like that is not going to get you what you want. So, can you give them some good advice for building relationships?
yeah, no, absolutely. I think the biggest piece is you have to understand that it has to be a win-win situation. When you are trying to build a relationship, it cannot be one way street. So try to understand what is the other person trying to kind of accomplish, and start with very genuine curiosity, but at the same time declare your intent. Hey, I'm new. I'm trying to kind of get experience. I do see you as an expert, and just be open and candid about it. I think most of the time what happens is people struggle to lay out the intent of why they're connecting, why they're interested in building that relationship. They don't say that because they assume people will understand. They assume that the other person on that side will understand. So that's kind of the biggest roadblock. So lay out your intent upfront, and that's okay. Some people will find you very direct. Sometimes it may work. Sometimes it may not work. But again, depends. Only way to do is you gotta test it out. You lay out intent to 100 people you're trying to kind of build a relationship in over the next 3 or 4 years. Maybe 10 of them will kind of end up being good of good partners and good friends, and that's how you build relations.
Thinking about your transition to people management, is there something you wish you had known that you found out or you wish you had known sooner?
People management is very interesting space. Why I say that? Because it's the word people. There's so many different permutation combinations when you think about the mindset, the culture. Who are you trying to manage? Who are the what is their culture? Where they're coming from? What is their intent? What is their motivation? One thing which I wish I would have learned pretty early on was never go into a role assuming that you know stuff. Go with a learner mindset. And learner mindset is not equal to like, hey, somebody will come and teach you. You'll have to discover. And then when you're actually managing people, try to be genuinely curious about, people. Understand what is driving them. What are their motivations? What are they trying to chase? What are the short-term goals? What are the long-term goals? Not everybody will open up, but if you stay curious and if you stay genuine at that kind of, early stage of, managing people, you will find success. That people will see you, hey, you know what, there is genuine curiosity, in helping me help him or help her or help them, from that perspective. So that's something I wish, I would have learned pretty early on, which I'm still learning as I'm kind of managing different people.
Um, so a lot of times when we go into these organizations, and you may have seen it a few times, we have to go in looking for the big win, right? How do we
Yeah.
impact? So thinking about your career, was there a big win that you were like, everybody just got it, you were excited about it, and really gave you some momentum in that company or that organization?
uh, Depends on how you define big win, right? I mean, like if you're defining big win from a finance standpoint, or from suddenly it's a viral product that you build and there's like a huge kind of influence in the market or in the state, so totally depends on that. I think from my perspective, I think the big win is when I go to a company and I understand, hey, what are they trying to kind of accomplish? And I'll give you a couple of examples. In my last company, one of the big win was, when I entered, we were bleeding cash in the bottom line. We were spending like crazy. And for me, it was like I cannot compromise experience, and at the same time, I cannot keep bleeding the cash. For me, it was like, hey, how do I balance this thing? And I knew this is not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to be at least a year or two long effort to kind of stop that bleeding without compromising experience. So when I was able to get to that after 2 years, that was a big win because I had went into that job or into that role with that outcome in mind, that I need to stop that bleeding and I need to turn the ship around. And that's a big win for me because everybody from sea level to peers and everybody understood the impact that it kind of drove. Again, goes back to my earlier kind of conversation about you have to think about system design. Otherwise, you keep solving for few symptoms, few root causes here and there, but you're not trying to build the system, you're not trying to change the system or improve a system. Then you can get some small wins in small period of time, but that win is not going to stay. So that's something is kind of my thinking of the big win versus kind of how you should think about it. does
One
that
thing
does
you
that
said,
answer your question? Just want to
it
get a
does.
feeling.
It absolutely does. And you said something that I was like, let's do that. But you said it took 2 years. So how did you keep the company engaged? Right? How did you get them to trust you for 2 years while you were turning the ship around?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. So what I don't want anybody to walk out of this conversation is, it's not about I'm telling, hey, don't look at my product, don't look at my team for 2 years. Close your eyes, and suddenly after 2 years, I'm gonna suddenly come up with a big win. No, you have to declare the outcome you're trying to chase. Whether it's a year or 2 year, and what are you gonna do now, tomorrow, and day after tomorrow. So you have to show them the path. That's why you have to bring clarity, and also you start saying, these are the short term wins that I'm going to accomplish in line for my long term goal that I'm trying to chase. And that's how you get credibility. You deliver small win, immediately, first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, as long as you keep reminding, hey, this is not end of it, we have not done yet, we're not even scratching the surface, this is the baby step number one in line with my long term goal. So you are earning credibility at every single stage and every single win that you are accomplishing. And
Hmm.
that's why it goes back to sell, sell, sell. You have to sell your team. You have to sell what you're doing and why you're doing. And nothing better than focusing on the customer itself. I think that answers your question, because I'm not saying, hey, nobody will give you 2 years blank. As simple as that. So you need to earn that. But you got to have a vision in your mind. You have to have vision and confidence with your team. Hey, we are on this from a long term perspective, but we are a public company. Let's go step by step. We have to accomplish this in the short term in order to for us to have funding for the next year and a half. And you cannot just kind of have a. There are companies who will have kind of deep pockets, without taking names. They can have you work on a single product for 3 years and then suddenly scrap the product, and that's okay too. But again, not everybody's going to be in that boat.
Now, what I love about that is, telling people we get so excited about doing the research, but that's just a small part, right? We still have to sell it. We have to keep reminding people that is part of the job. That's not extra. That is
Yeah.
part of the job. So no, that's very helpful. Okay. And then the last question I'll ask you is around research.
Mhm.
What does good research look like to you? How do you know that the research that you're looking at is quality and good and impactful? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I think the word research is similar to customer experience, that it is fluffy at the same time, fluffy for the people who don't understand that or who are not the experts in that field.
Hmm.
They use it without understanding or without having any depth in that. People will talk, oh, yeah, we're a customer experience company. Oh, yeah, we've done research. But for me, research is like when you are clear about what was the problem that you were trying to discover, what was the problem that you were trying to kind of build the hypothesis around, and what were the discoveries that you were trying to get out. The biggest piece is, what were the insights that you were trying to understand. Were you trying to just truly have exploratory research, or were you doing a tactical research? So the tactics and the way, again, I'm not going to say I'm an expert on research, but the space itself, you know depends on that, will dictate which method you're going to take to drive the research. And then all of that leads to what insights, and who are these insights for? How are we going to bring these insights forward to the product teams or to the dev teams or to the leadership to kind of make it more actionable, to kind of get that investment, get that product, or get that service, come to fruition. So that's what research means, when it is clearly defined with what are the problems that we're trying to solve, what are the insights that we're trying to look for. And it's okay, sometimes research, you'll do most of the research like, yeah, we got the insights, but that's not what we were looking for, and that's okay, then you pivot at that time. But having that kind of cadence and discipline is very important.
So that's all the questions I have. I think that was amazing. All right. Well, Gunny, thank you so much. I have really enjoyed our conversation. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you would like to leave with my audience?
Yeah, so one thing I'm very passionate about, and you will see this often and repeatedly from my kind of writing, as well as kind of my saying, is, for me, experience matters. That's something I'm very passionate about. And then great experience are built by humans, where companies, when they bring the product folks, CX folks, UX folks together and have a shared accountability. We win when we show up together, especially when we're focused on listening to the customers deeply and then act on those decisions quickly rather than waiting for 3 years. And constantly ask this question, in every level of the meeting or the conversation you have, whether you're a board member, whether you're a C level, does this feel better for the customer? Or does it really help the customer? Yes, it's going to help my sales pipeline, it's going to help my margins, but does it really help the customer? Because if you, as a CX professional, you as a UX professional, if you don't ask this question, then you're not doing your job. You're here for the customer. So you have to ask that question. Does this feel better for the customer?
That is perfect. Thank you so much, Guneet, for even taking the time to meet with me. You have been delightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrian, for having me.